Okay, welcome everybody. I'm Dennis Lyons, the editor of the Daily Item, and we're here in our actual conference room, but we are socially distanced, and we have State Senator Gene Yaw with us from the 23rd District. And Senator, thanks for being here. Obviously, we're trying to get going with our conversations with candidates a little bit earlier in the year than we normally do, because people are going to be voting by mail, and I want to
That's a great idea.
give them an opportunity to hear you. So
Great idea.
there you go. Okay. So obviously, I'm sitting here talking to you with a mask on, and I guess it would be stupid to ask about anything else first. Give me your assessment of the Pennsylvania state response to COVID, how it's been handled, and specifically on Governor Wolf and Dr. Levine's handling of it all.
But that's a wide open question. I can speak, and I'm not going to speak for the entire state because I know that there are parts of the state that look at it entirely differently than in my district. In my district, I think that the biggest concern was the shutdown and the lockdown. And I hear this all the time, and I still hear it repeatedly, is why doesn't the governor treat us like adults? And I agree with that. I mean, people are, they're pretty responsible. They're not going out and overly be in contact with one another, at least in my experience. I've been to numerous events where there have been large crowds there. Maybe in one event was in excess of 200 people, and it was managed well. People stayed apart. I mean, I'm not saying that they weren't, close together. And I thought it was really interesting at that event. There were probably half a dozen doctors, and people just did, and there was not a problem with it. That is not the way we're treated. I almost get the feeling sometimes that people are going to take whatever the numbers are and they're going to make them fit what they want to do. We had, I forget what the number was today, 700 and some new cases today. But when you look at it, we've had less than 500 hospitalized for at least the last 2 weeks. Which tells you something. Out of almost 13 million people, we have less than 500 in the hospital over this issue. So maybe we should be a little bit more flexible in some of the things that we're doing.
Could the argument be made that some of these mitigation techniques have allowed that to be the case?
Well, I guess you could argue that. That's true. But I think you can argue it. I don't agree with that, though.
Well, just this week, federal judge in Pittsburgh ruled on Governor Wolf's mitigation efforts, including limits on crowd size and shutdown orders. Governor said he'll appeal the ruling short term. What does that mean? I mean, we have football games every Friday night. And what are the longer term implications might we see?
Well, that ruling, remember where it came from. It came out of the Western District of Pennsylvania. So there's serious legal question as to whether or not that actually applies here. We're in the Middle District. And there are some of the consultants that I've spoken with said, it really probably does not have statewide application. So, but I think it's indicative of things that people have been saying for months now, that just because there's a sickness out there or we're facing some tough times, that doesn't suspend the constitutional rights that people have. You have to find another way to deal with it. The governor said, he said a couple of things about it. I know that one of the things he did is he trashed the legislature. He chose to okay, I'm not going to listen to this judge. I don't agree with them, so I'm going to trash the legislature. Okay, Governor, if that's the way you want to go. And then the next thing he said is that I'm going to appeal this decision right away. Well, he hasn't appealed it yet. I'm not sure he's going to appeal it. I don't know. There are other court decisions. I think there's actually one in the Eastern District that is not the same as the one in the Western District. I'm sure that if it goes, the place to go is to the Third Circuit to find out, then that would cover all of Pennsylvania. I think that, I had a call today from a school district, that very same thing that you talked about. They want to have a football game. And they asked me, does that ruling apply? And there's the House bill out there, which is before the governor too, which would put assembly for extracurricular and sporting events in the hands of the local school board to decide. You decide what the capacity is of your stadium or how you want to do it. Those issues are out there. I don't know what the governor's going to do with them. I don't know what he's going to do with the House Bill 2787, which is the bill that was passed in the legislature, and most recently we passed it in the Senate, and it's now before the governor, whether he's going to just let it go, whether he's going to veto it. He said he was going to veto it right away. That hasn't happened yet. The decision, I caution people about the decision being from the Western District, that it may have some applicability here. It may have some precedential value in a similar case here, but directly applicable to this area, no, I don't think it is.
I know there are a lot of parents
Oh.
who are concerned about this. I've talked with some superintendents, and they're going along with the current mitigation, although they would very much like to have more than 250.
I feel bad. I mean, a few years ago, I had a daughter that graduated from high school, and if my daughter were in the situation that the juniors and seniors are, I have a granddaughter who's a senior in high school and is a good athlete. She is so upset about what is happening and her inability to, you can go out on a travel team and play all kinds of sports. Matter of fact, most kids that I'm aware of played sports all summer long. They either played softball, they played basketball or soccer or lacrosse or whatever the travel team is out there. But yet you can't go back to high school and do it. I'll tell you, in the southeastern part of the state, what this lockdown is doing, or the inability to play high school sports, it's killing high school sports. Because what the parents are doing is they're taking their kids and they're saying, well, they can't play in high school, but they can play on this travel team, and we're going to play in Maryland and Delaware and everywhere else. And they're doing it. They've done it all summer long. I almost get the feeling sometimes that the governor and Dr. Levine are not listening. They don't know what is really going on in the real world.
Dave?
Senator, thanks for joining us.
Sure.
We've had so much attention paid in recent weeks by lawmakers to school officials to parents about fans in the stands at sporting events. Are we focused too much on that and not enough on the fact that schools are fighting to keep their doors open right now and appropriately educating students remotely and maintaining student health and feeding kids in school? Are we on the wrong priority?
I don't think so, and I'll tell you why. If you talk to anybody about how important being involved, when I say being involved in some extracurricular activity is to being in school, I think that it's just as critical in some respects as being in school studying some particular subject. Yeah, I'll go back to my kids. I'm fortunate. I have two kids that are both lawyers now. But we particularly wanted them to go to public school, because I think that a public school environment for me is critical. That interaction, and they were both athletes. And they both had great experiences, but that experience went. It's hard to explain. It's the camaraderie. It's everything else. It's being a good student, and all these things go together. So, when people say, well, I've been involved with our local school board for almost 20 years now, and I remember the ABCs of education, athletics, band, and cheerleading. Mm-hmm. So it is important, and I don't fault people for carrying that. That's where their kids, it's a great experience, and I do everything that I can to help promote it.
Are we doing enough, though, to have to help the parents who are struggling with trying to maintain their jobs while their kids may have to be home?
No, and I can tell you the number one issue in my district is broadband. I mean, I'll answer that question right off the bat. We're not doing enough. And I don't know what we do. And the more you're fortunate here, you have a more urban area that you probably have broadband. You go to Bradford, Sullivan County, which is part of my district, and it's like, what are we doing? How do we get kids? How do we educate them? It's not only education, now, but if you want to ask a question about it, but what has been brought to the forefront as a result of the COVID-19 is the importance of telemedicine. And that's broadband too. That's the number one issue that
broadband is important. What about helping parents find alternate ways to take care of their kids?
Yes, I agree.
While they're
I agree. One of the things that we have talked about is to ask. We're looking into it right now in my staff as to whether or not we can have some exception to the daycare type facilities where a parent, like a group of parents, 2 or 3 parents could get together and say, okay, you watch my kids today and I'll watch them tomorrow, and that type of thing, without falling under the rules for being a daycare center or something like that, an exception to it. I can tell you, I know some parents in Williamsport that went together and actually rented some office space, and they're doing that. They rotate, but the kids go there. They have high-speed internet on their days when they're not in school. They go there. I know a friend of mine who has a healthcare facility, has his kids come because where they live they don't have broadband, so they've set up a room, and his son and his friends come, and they are there in the afternoons on the days when they're not actually in school, and they've made that available for them. So the answer to the question is I think we need to do more, and we need to have some exceptions here that reflect the time that we're involved in.
Bill?
I'm going to stay on the broadband here for a second. You talked about rural Sullivan County and things like that. We have some areas like that, western Snyder County, western Union County, even some.
You have some areas of that, like just south of here on Route 15.
Right, like
I run into them all the time.
How critical is it? Just now, I'm fortunate enough that I live in a place where there's decent broadband, but there was a time in March and April and May where my wife, who works in the healthcare industry, was doing telemedicine appointments from our home while our 2 children were both remote learning from our house at the same time. We're fortunate enough to have the access we do here. How difficult is it representing a rural district to impress upon those from Philadelphia and Pittsburgh and things like that this matters? It's very important to us. We need to get this going right now.
That's a good question. I guess I have the same problem impressing that on people as you do impressing on the people from Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, any of the other issues that we face in rural Pennsylvania, whether it's transportation or, all those. It is difficult, and one of the more difficult things is the cost involved. I mean, I have... I'm really fortunate, I think, in my district. It's part of my district, but it goes into, I think, Senator Scarnati's district. There's a rural electric company called Tri-County Rural Electric. It's the only one, to my knowledge, in the state that has taken on the responsibility of they're going to run fiber optic on throughout their whole service area. They received I think it's, Connect America grant, federal grant. They get like $3 million a year for 10 years every year, and then plus they received another grant of like $15 million from the state. And with those two grants together, they're going to try and put broadband access to every one of their customers. I think that that's a pilot program here in Pennsylvania. It's the only operation of its kind like that I'm aware of, and I give them all the credit in the world for taking on that responsibility and trying to do it. But they're in northwestern Lycoming County and part of Tioga County, and I'm not sure what the next one, Potter or Elk or some of those
Up there,
counties.
you run into topography and geography issues as well.
It's horrible,
Right.
but they have. Their touchstone was, we have the poles. The poles belong to us. We don't have to go negotiate with somebody over, and I never realized it before, but where your line is located on a pole is it's actually governed by the federal regulation. But I thought, this is something that they don't need to do. It's a headache, I know, for them and everything else, but I'm just hoping that they're very successful. I forget how many miles the line they ran. I think they told me like 300 miles already. But that's the type of thing that we have to do, and that's what we don't have in my area of the state. And I know that there are pockets here that don't have it.
Okay, Bill, should we go to some of the, do you have another one?
I just wanted to, one of the things he did talk about very briefly in the first question was the data. What are you hearing from, when you're in Harrisburg, what are you hearing from your constituents sort of about, today, I think for the 11th time since August 1st, Union County's number came down. Their number of COVID
Yeah, I
cases
saw the -1.
dropped again. One of the issues we ran into here last month was Union County was the only county that had that substantial mark, that metric of 100 cases per 100,000 over a 7-day window. How do you sort of talk to your constituents about when one of the metrics is based on something that's going up and down every day? I mean, how frustrating is that for you? How frustrating is it for your constituents?
I mean, in a nutshell, it is. It's frustrating. It's frustrating to deal with. We're still not sure. And there's all kind of anecdotal stories out there that the numbers aren't accurate, and I think they're still there. I mean, I can tell you one of a situation where there were two people going to Myrtle Beach to play golf, and they went to a drugstore and to one that provided COVID-19 testing to be tested. And they signed the paperwork, and then after they signed the paperwork, they were told, okay, it's a 2-hour wait. And they said, we're not waiting 2 hours, and they left. 4 days later, they both got letters saying they tested positive. Now, I don't understand where some of this stuff comes from. I don't get it. So I think that there's always questions about the accuracy of the data and where it comes from. I know that the coroners were upset about it at first, and that's pretty much died down at this point. But the numbers just weren't accurate. And even though you have large numbers in one county, supposedly those deaths could have occurred in Philadelphia. But they're attributed to whatever might be on your driver's license or your ID or whatever, that's who gets credit for it. Or credit's not the right word, I guess, to use.
Where it gets accounted for in the data.
Accounting would probably be better.
All right, so after I ask this question, I'm going to get one of the people on the Zoom meeting portion of it to
Okay.
ask. But you supported Senate Bill 1166 about the emergency declaration reduction. I guess it has been 90 days, and under your bill or the bill you supported, it'd be 21 days unless the General Assembly approved it to be longer. Why is that important?
I think that it's a recognition, that bill was a recognition of constitutional rights, to say that, wait a minute, there are constitutional rights that are affected by these long-term lockdown orders or the whatever. And at a minimum, And the reason we picked, 21 days just means that the governor could issue an emergency declaration, and he could also extend it, but he has to do it after, with consultation with the General Assembly. And, supposedly the General Assembly, we represent the people in Pennsylvania. So I think that the people in Pennsylvania have a right to say something about what happens to them. That's, in a nutshell, that's why I supported it.
Okay. All right, does somebody have a,
So Harvey, did you have a question? We can move on to, these are community advisory board members for us. Okay, Senator. Okay, Harvey? I think he's
Hello, Senator Harvey Edwards. I'm a professor at Susquehanna University in the English department and creative writing. And I just wanted to go back to the whole mask thing and mitigation. It would seem to me that you could also interpret wearing masks as stifling the virus because of the asymptomatic people who might be carrying it. So the only way that we're going to get past this is if we contain the virus, and masks would seem to be the best weapon against doing that. And so, again, to go revisit that whole statement again, allowing people to believe that their freedom is curtailed by wearing a mask is to overlook the bigger picture regarding the safety of those around them. Would you agree with that or not?
No, I don't. And, I don't know of anywhere that says that, people have individual freedoms. And when you start telling people that they have to wear certain things, wear a mask, why not wear certain clothes? What's the difference?
Well, we are required to wear seatbelts for safety. What's the difference?
I don't think that seatbelts are in a specific environment, not just a general environment where you're outside and whatever. And I understand. Look, I understand where you're coming from. I've read a lot about it. Both sides of it. I know that there's even legislation pending that would make it a major crime in Pennsylvania if you didn't wear a mask. I understand that. I just disagree with it. I think that part of the problems that we've created our own problem to some extent. Our concern was supposedly to not overwhelm the health systems, that we were going to, we needed to flatten the curve. Well, what happened was we not only flattened the curve, we ruined the health. We had such an impact on the health systems that we cost the health system billions of dollars because we said you cannot do elective surgery. And the reason is we're waiting for this huge surge in hospital cases. That huge surge never occurred. It never occurred. I think at one time, the only number I know was UPMC was using, they had 5,500 beds and they were using I forget what it was, 2%. And they said, wait a minute, this is costing us billions of dollars because we can't treat people. We also scared people to death. They're still scared. We hear stories. I heard stories today about people that have not been out of the house for 3 or 4 months. Maybe it's just a difference in the philosophy of saying, there are some risks in life. Every day there are risks, and we can try and mitigate some of them, but some of them are out there, and it's just the way that we have to deal with things. I think that part of the problem, as I said, we were so intent on flattening the curve. I think that what we did is we flattened the curve. There's no question about that. We flattened it, and what we did is what happens when you take a curve and flatten it, you stretch it out. And I think that we've taken something that may have run its course, and no question, there were people that are very susceptible to it, and we would have maybe had more deaths. But in the long run, would we have had more? I'm not sure. We may have been. I think what we have done is take maybe something that would have run over a period of 6 months, and we've stretched it out into years.
So if you go to the grocery store, do you wear a mask?
Yes.
Okay.
And just to follow up, to use the anecdote that you gave, the two people going to Myrtle Beach to play golf, here they might very well have appeared asymptomatic or were asymptomatic, and yet they went to play golf carrying the virus. And so there again, if they weren't wearing masks, whatever, thinking that they don't matter, it doesn't matter, I don't have to worry about it, how many people could they have possibly affected? And so I don't understand the rationale of it's a violation of our civil liberties and freedoms to wear a mask when the consequences are stark. 200,000 Americans dead.
Is that what the number is? Is that what it is? I'm not sure.
195.
Why didn't we have masks a couple years ago when 80,000 people died and we had a vaccine?
Are you talking about the flu?
Whatever caused it. We had the flu, we had 80,000 people died, and there was a vaccine.
Well, in the case of the flu, I would say maybe we're learning our lesson, and when flu season hits, more people will be wearing masks.
Here's what we'll do. We'll agree to disagree.
That's respectful.
Thank you.
Mike or Mark, who would like to go? Okay, Mark?
Yeah. How are you doing? Pastor Mark Gittins, Higher Hope Advisory Board member. Quick question about the federal ruling that was just passed here, I think September 14th, about just how it affects the different counties. I'm talking about gathering sizes.
Right.
As a pastor, I'm just trying to understand some of these things. I know that we are generally, religious organizations are generally exempt. Is there, what's your thoughts about that and protecting churches' rights to kind of do what we need to do for our faith sake?
I'm not sure what your question is. If you're talking about the Western District case, as I've said, there's serious question as to whether or not that has any applicability across the state. There's another question about it too, the way you ask your question, and that is the judge. Look, I've been through this thing very briefly one time, so I'm not going to get all the details. Remember that it's a 66-page opinion. But the judge drew a distinction between those events or those gatherings that involve cultural or civic or sports events versus commercial activities. And what he said was that they were treated differently. And like, for example, going to the grocery store. And for that reason, that's what he found to be an unconstitutional or a constitutional violation. So I don't think he ever really addressed the numbers per se.
All right, and we know for sure that it's only going to affect Western Pennsylvania counties.
No, not necessarily. That's at first blush, it is a Western District case, which applies, and I can't name the number of counties. It's like 10 counties or 15 or whatever it is in Western part of the state. I can't name them, but I mean that's the typical though of the way the federal system is organized and the way it operates in Pennsylvania under any circumstances.
Okay, and my last thing is just, first of all, I know you've done a lot over the years for opioid addictions and things going on, and I do appreciate it. And I just want to encourage you to not only to continue to like really invest in that, because the pandemic has really caused a real uptick in relapses and in drug overdoses that are not necessarily being highlighted everywhere, but it is definitely still having its effects here in our community. So please don't forget to champion things for that. Continue.
No, we haven't, and thank you for raising that question, because I've done a lot of work with public television. I don't know whether you're familiar with it, but I think there are 8 public television stations in Pennsylvania, and what they did is they started a program called Battling Opioids, and every television station did a program or did multiple programs, and I think I've worked with the WVIA, and I think we've done 5 programs, and I did one about 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, somewhere. I think it was 3 weeks ago. And the issue that you raised right here came up. They said, has this taken a back seat? To some extent, it has. And and I'll give you one example. One of the most important things you can do is get treatment to people right away. Especially, we had recovery specialists, CRS, Certified Recovery Specialist, tried to get them in emergency rooms to be able to talk to people when they overdosed or were brought in right away. That was critical. Well, under COVID, access to emergency rooms is very, very limited, and those are the types of people that have been excluded. So that's caused some serious concerns. And we also have, issues with people staying home. Unfortunately, more overdose deaths. I forget what there is a percentage out there. You're correct. The overdose deaths have gone up. Use has gone up, unfortunately. So it is something. It's around. It's going to be here long after, unfortunately, long after COVID-19, I think, ends.
Okay, thank you, Mark.
Mike?
And Mike?
Okay, Mike Molisevich here, Lewisburg. I'm self-employed environmental consultant contractor for over 30 years. And my question to you is, why do you believe you need to be a lobbyist or a cheerleader and promote the natural gas industry at the same time belittling and bashing the renewable energy industry, which we have both in this state? So, do you not understand the basics of climate science and the basics of a greenhouse effect? That when you look at what's happening in California with extreme fires, extreme flooding in the South, and right now, even right here, the Susquehanna River is at one of its lowest stages than I can recall. Why can't you support a good, sound policy to reduce energy consumption, improve renewables and efficiency?
Here is one thing that I will say to you. Name one clean or green energy project that does not depend on fossil fuels. One. Name one.
Ambient energy.
What is ambient energy?
It's thermal energy that we get through passive solar greenhouses or passive solar designs.
How do you get it?
It comes right through your window. It's ultraviolet radiation it's turned into infrared heat.
How is it turned into infrared heat?
The thing that you keep forgetting is that what renewables have the advantage on is that they do not have the emissions. We have carbon dioxide levels.
Sir, what you're not recognizing is what it takes to get to the renewables. Do you think that a windmill just drops out of the sky? How about a solar panel? And then how do you dispose? Look, we're never going to agree on anything.
Rick, you were going to ask a question about the greenhouse
Oddly
gas
enough,
emissions.
I was going to ask about RGGI. You did write an op-ed about
Yes,
that.
I did.
You said that it was short-sighted. That some parts are admirable, but in the every energy source has an environmental impact. How can Pennsylvania maintain its leadership role as an energy producer and also maintain a healthy environment?
We've done it. The Pennsylvania has reduced the greenhouse gases by about 25% since 2005. And you know how we've done it? Industry has done it. The industry has done it on their own. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, I think that the greenhouse gas emissions in the United States are the lowest they've been since the Industrial Revolution. I think that, once again, I have a better trust, belief in people. You tell them what needs to be done, they will do it. And I think in this case that our industries and our especially our energy generation has really done it. You know, I support, and I have said this from day one, I have nothing against nuclear, I have nothing against solar, I have nothing against wind energy. I grew up at a time when I was told your investment should be a diverse portfolio, diversity. I believe the same about energy. We need a diverse energy portfolio. Pennsylvania is fortunate. We have probably the largest collection of environmental resources of any state in the country. And we have everything here. We have gas, we have coal, we have solar, we have wind, we've got hydroelectric, we've got geothermal, we've got wood. Significant number of my constituents still burn wood or use wood as fuel. I just think that Pennsylvania, being a leader in energy production, that we've done a pretty good job, and I think that we will continue to do that. And my objection to RGGI is that it targets one part of one industry. And I think that that's wrong. We need to look at all parts of any industry and then make decisions as to what should be done. Going back to the thing that I said, I think that diversity is very, very important.
Couple of last things before we wrap up, Senator. Volunteer firefighters, you supported a proposal that would provide tuition assistance for state system colleges for students who volunteer as firefighters.
Yes.
With everything else going on, is that still cooking? Where does that stand? And what other initiatives do you think could help replenish the dwindling number of volunteer firefighters?
Well, that's a
Could go on for a long time.
whoa. The answer is, yeah, I don't think that, I can't tell you exactly where those bills are at this point. I just don't. Like everything else, they've taken a back seat. As far as volunteers and volunteer fire companies in particular, we need to change the dynamics. We need a new model, and I don't have a magic solution to that. When I was growing up, volunteer fire companies were the social gathering point of the community. Everybody went there. Fathers went there, their sons went there, and there was a continuity. That is not the way that it's gone on anymore. People are busy. They're busy with kids and everything else that goes on. We don't have that continuity, and people don't have the commitment. One of the reasons they don't have the commitment like that anymore is just think about it. What are the statistics now that people are going to have 8 to 10 jobs during their lifetime? So it's not like I grew up or my dad grew up in an area and he found a job and stayed there for his whole life. That's not the way it's going to work anymore. So there's not that connectivity. What we have to do to get people, maybe we need to go to some extent to some paid thing of some sort. I don't know, but it is a huge issue, and it's one we've wrestled with. I remember one hearing that I was at, we took the person that testified was a fire chief, and I forget from where, and he said, you know what, one of the problems that we have is we've created our own problems. He said, fire companies have been the go-to people. You know, if you have a cat in a tree, who do you call? You call the fire company. Or if there's a tree down across the power line, who do you call? You call the fire company. And said, well, why don't you call the electric company? Or why don't you call PennDOT if there's something going on with the road? We've been our own problem, so they get more calls. And then there's the other part out there is that maybe there's too many of them too. For a while, every community out there had their own fire company, and it was a question of distance and everything. And now maybe we can't afford that, and it may be something that those of us who live in rural Pennsylvania just have to accept, is to say that this is not the way it can be anymore. You have to accept more risk if you're going to be in rural Pennsylvania.
Finally, Senator, yesterday we learned that Senator Scarnati had filed a lawsuit against the Lancaster newspaper group and their publication, a couple of reporters, trying to get them to, I guess, reimburse them something like $6,000 for records that we certainly feel here at this newspaper should be public. Your thoughts on the state law says 25 cents a page. They want way more than that. What are your thoughts on charging the public for public records?
I don't think that there's a really fixed answer, and I understand where you're coming from. I don't have any problems with transparency and making anything that we do is open. How things are, there is a cost to putting this information together, and this works both ways. I mean, it comes from getting information from other sources, not only in the, you're talking about the news media, I'm talking about other legal sources where record keeping like that. And it face the same issue. What about the cost involved, and what's reasonable, and how do you do it? I didn't know, that was news to me, that Senator Scarnati filed it. I wasn't aware of that. He doesn't consult with me when he files lawsuits, but in any event.
Well, I mean, the problem,
Yeah.
you know, it's obviously you've got a media organization that might have the ability to pay that kind of fee, but an average person, and way more of the right to know requests are done by average citizens than are done by newspapers.
Yeah.
And that would be a real chilling concern, I would think.
I don't disagree. It's an issue out there that we have to deal with. Now, there is a flip side to this too, and you may or may not have been aware of it. I guarantee you your school district here is aware of it. There is a person who has been filing right-to-know requests against every school district in the state, which has literally cost, my guess is at this point, tens of millions of dollars to provide records, because the particular individual says that the Pennsylvania State School Boards Association and the PSEA are in cahoots, that they've orchestrated all these issues, you know, about education and everything else. And this has been going on for about 5 years. There have been multiple lawsuits and everything else. That, in my opinion, is an abuse of what's out there. But
Right, but that's also, you know, probably an isolated incident.
and
You know, the bottom
hopefully
line
it
is
is.
we can't have individuals going and having, because it's being handled by an accounting firm or whatever, having to pay $5,000 and $6,000 just to get what should be public information. Okay, we will leave it there. Thank you very much, Senator, for being with us, and we'll be in touch. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.